Welcome back to False Dichotomies. I'm Cy Castells.
I'm Daria Quinn, and today we are discussing Failure's 1996 record, Fantastic Planet.
Yep. And this is one that I had never heard of. I am really glad that I listened to it because I think that I almost wanted to delay recording this episode because I feel like there's so much in there that I haven't quite absorbed yet, but I have a feeling that would take years anyway.
Yes.
So yeah, this is definitely a good pick. It's one of those things where, like, the more you listen to it, the more you will find in it. Right. And that goes for the lyrics as well as the sounds. Yeah. What the first observation just from the very first notes was that, wow, this is a very intricately textured album. The first sounds you hear on the album are this, like, music that sounds mechanical, but when I had listened to it several times, I heard, oh, most of this is acoustic piano. Mm-hmm. And it feels like mechanical and clockwork.
It's sort of like a rotary chime.
Yeah, a little bit. That riff gets reprised later on in the album, and there's also other parts that are, like, reminiscent of machinery, and that goes along with some of the themes that you find in the lyrics as well, which we will get into. Yeah.
And when I initially proposed this album, I basically described it as the life of a drug addict disguised as a sci-fi story.
Yeah, and there's a strong theme of space. Actually, one of the songs is literally called Another Space Song. And there's several songs that use imagery of space travel and as like a way of describing the distance between the perspective character and everybody around them. Yeah. It's being like, you're literally floating out in space.
Yeah, I discovered Failure in 1996. I used to have a long commute to school. Okay. Something like a half hour, 45-minute commute.
Wow.
I was living in a different county at the time, and my parents and my mom and my stepdad moved abruptly in the middle of the summer because my stepdad he's former stepdad. They've now divorced.
Right.
Yeah, he is really bad with money. So he's actually the reason my mom lost her second house. Somebody didn't pay the rent and utilities for a few months, and we had to go, and we actually stayed with his parents for a couple of months before moving in with one of my mom's friends. We didn't know how long I was going to be there, and we were attempting to move back into Canton. So we decided to lie to the school system.
You wouldn't be the only family that did that.
Yeah. So I could stay in my school until we found another place in Canton. So about half of a school year I spent making this, like, near hour-long commute. I would be I would be flipping between various radio stations to the great annoyance of my mother. Pick a station and stick with it. It's like, I can't...
But none of the stations are any good. There may be a few good songs in each one.
There was one that was really good, but the reception wasn't always great. And, of course, commercials. I can't stand commercials.
No, me either. That's why I listen to classical radio.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be profitable to sell commercials on classical radio.
So on this commute, I heard "Stuck on You."
Good one.
I heard this song maybe twice or three times in the 3.5 months that I was what I was doing this commute. Because ultimately, we ended up moving back up with my stepdad's family. So I ended up having to change schools in the middle of the year anyway, because if we would have not done this, I would have changed schools 3 times that year instead of once. Yeah.
This is why we need to, like, stabilize the housing market, make it so that a low-income family can afford to have, and I know you said that your ex-stepdad was bad with money, but, like, it's much harder to be good with money when you don't have enough of it.
Yeah. Well, the thing about my stepdad was he had a tendency to job hop. Everything he wanted to do would cost money to be able to do it. Like, he wanted to be a cop. He wanted to be a fireman. He wanted to be an EMT. He chased tornadoes for a while. And you don't make money chasing tornadoes.
Oh, no. That you lose money and other things doing that.
So, like, the one steady job that he was able to hold, we actually did as a family, because it was the only way we could do it was we used to deliver the Tribune, the newspaper in Warren. We used to deliver it to the delivery people.
Oh.
Back when, you still had paper boys.
Who delivered to the deliveryman?
Yeah, we were those people.
Okay.
So, it would be an overnight thing, and when I was out of school, I would be expected to help. So, of course, my first exposure to exploitative labor.
That's a rough time. And, like, having an overnight kind of job when you're also in school during the day is, like, not good for your health or your education.
It was the weekends.
Yeah.
The overnight was the weekends. So if I was doing anything, it would be on the weekend.
That's still bad for your health, though, because you're radically changing your sleep schedule throughout the week.
Yeah. So I heard Stuck on You maybe twice in this entire period. And it was on the good radio station that I could only get in sometimes. And I was able to remember this song for almost a year before I found the record.
And that's something that, like, kids who don't remember the time of trying to listen to music before the internet, the radio did not, like, have a text on it telling you what song it was. I mean, I know that a lot of, like, radios have that functionality now, but when we were kids, no.
No.
And if you didn't happen to catch the DJ mentioning the name of the song and the band, you were shit out of luck.
I didn't even know that Failure was the name of the band.
Yeah.
I found a CD in the mall, and it was half price. Like, everything else would be like, because mall CD prices were almost $20 at the time. Wow. And for like a disc, I found this for like $7.
Nice.
And it, and the sticker said, hit song Stuck on You. Like, hit song my ass, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it's like, when they're trying to move the discs, they have to be like, hey, look, this song you might have heard once in a while is on this. Don't you want to buy it?
So it's
apparently it worked at least.
So it's like, it had this 1950s sci-fi pulp fiction novel looking cover.
Yeah, it does.
And Failure, Fantastic Planet, Stuck on You, and I'm just like, you know what? It's only $7. We'll find out for sure.
Yes.
Worst thing that's going to happen is it's not the song I'm thinking of.
Right, yeah.
And it turned out not only to be the song I was thinking of, but it turned out to be one of the best purchases I've ever made in my life. And one of my favorite records.
And that's another thing that, like, those of us who remember what it was like before the internet was widely available. And yeah, the internet did still exist back then, but it was something exclusively used by computer companies and really, really dedicated geeks who had access to the equipment, which was not cheap.
And dial-up was a nightmare. You kids today have no idea what dial-up is like.
In my day, the internet came through the phone, not your cell phone, the landline.
What's a landline, you ask? Well, once upon a time, phones were connected through the same system that electricity was connected to.
Yep, and you had to punch in that phone number. You know that phone number that you don't even really think about anymore because, like, you might have your own memorized, but everyone else is just like a name in your contacts.
Yeah.
You had to enter that manually, and it would just ring, and would go bring, 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 and then if the person you were calling wasn't at home, like physically in their house, then they wouldn't answer the phone because they couldn't, because you can't bring the phone with you. Anyway, this is a tangent. But yeah, looking for music in those days, it was like, I cannot begin to describe how much of a explosion in my musical universe I experienced when I first discovered that you can find music through the internet. Suddenly there were entire genres of music that I did not know about because they were not quite popular enough to make it into the mainstream radio station. And the days before that, it was like a treasure hunt in the dark without a map.
And the other thing that we need to note as far as for our younger viewers, the radio these days has like 6 formats.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's you have your top 40, you have your mainstream rock, you have country, you have Christian radio, and they're very homogenized. A lot of subgenres get pushed out of the market because, if you don't fit into these 6 programming things, you're not going to get play. Plus, of course, you're competing with like oldies radio, which is playing all the hits of forever and a day. And in the 90s, there was a lot of that still, but it wasn't as concentrated.
Yeah.
There were actually alternative radio stations. There's still college stations now, but college stations were more likely to play obscure music.
Also, like, radio stations themselves were generally locally owned. Until, like, I want to say the 90s and the early 2000s, most of them were locally owned. We did not have iHeartRadio. Your radio station DJ was someone from your local community, and they would talk about local issues in between talking. I mean, there's a couple of shows like that, but they're generally in larger cities. Yeah. I know Cleveland has a couple of them, but Cleveland is what they call the home of rock and roll. So, like, it would be kind of sacrilegious if Cleveland did not have locally owned radio stations. But in a place like Canton, I imagine that's not as much of a thing.
So yeah, the station that I heard failure on was 107.9 The End, which got bought out in 1999 and turned into a hip hop station.
I remember The End. It was called The End because it was at the end of the radio dial. It was like the highest numbered station.
For a school project, I was expected to make a small radio show. So my radio call letters were 87.9 The Beginning.
Nice.
I had to remember how far to the left it was. The thing is that The End became like the only radio station I had because 2 years prior, WMMS, which was also an alternative radio station, MMS the Buzzard for our Cleveland.
Yeah, and WMMS is still around.
Yeah, but they switched their format back to classic rock. In 1997, I had no use for AC/DC. I don't necessarily have much of a use for AC/DC now either, but
other than as a slang term for bisexual.
Oh, I was not aware of that.
It is. Because it's
the two different currents.
Yeah, exactly. So track 1, Saturday Savior.
So Saturday Savior is on the surface about someone who is not looking for a committed relationship. Someone who is really only here for your one-night stand, and that's about it.
I went a little bit deeper with my reading, and a little bit less specifically to romantic relationships. Right. I had listened through the album a couple of times, and then I was like, I need to be looking at the lyrics while I'm reading this, and then I started with listened to it once while reading the lyrics, and then I was like, I need to stop for a while because this hit me pretty freaking hard. Because it reminds me of a specific familial relationship that I have where I cannot be what that person wants me to be. And I cannot have the kind of reciprocal emotional relationship is expected of a familial relationship. And the words like, I'm never going to make you feel that you're satisfied. I'm never going to feel your pain like you wish I would. I'm never going to open up more than this. And then later on, I'm never going to push you out because you're not in. It's like recognizing the reality of not being able to connect fully with someone. Yeah. Just being there for one night, give some of your superficial resources to this person just to like pay lip service to the conventions of the relationship, but not being able and not really being interested in like deepening that bond.
And some translations of this, because they look at this as sort of, we might as well just get it out of the way now. This album is about heroin.
Yeah.
Very specifically heroin addiction. We'll get into the direct links to why that is in later songs, but some people translate this as basically heroin as a personification, telling the user, hey, I'm not here for anything more than a good time.
I think putting it in like first person terms like that, being like, a lot of people who are socially isolated turn to addiction, not consciously of course, but like they will rely on addictions to replace connections that they need. There's this famous TED Talk, I forgot the name of the guy, but the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection.
Yeah.
So the fact that like I connected it to this actual physical relationship with a person that is inadequate for both of us.
Yeah. It's definitely about emotional unavailability. And the obvious reading is that this is someone who is not looking for anything more than a few minutes of sex, but it's also I'm not looking for close relationships. I'm not looking for a specific bond. I wouldn't give it to you if I tried. This could be either the addict talking to another person who may be trying to help them. It could be the drug talking to the addict. There are a lot of ways to read this, which will be an ongoing theme in this record.
And that's why I'm not, especially when I was listening to it for the first several times, and I wasn't finding the specific sci-fi elements that you led me to expect. I was like, you know what though? There's a lot in here. If I don't see that right away, I'm sure I'll.
Well, the sci-fi reading was based. The reason I mention that is because if you look at the album cover, that is like this parody of an L. Ron Hubbard. It's actually based on an L. Ron Hubbard book cover. Called To the Stars. So,
Oh, that's interesting, though, because, like, L. Ron Hubbard is also in Scientology.
Well, he was the founder of Scientology.
Yeah, and Scientology is one of those religions that capitalizes on people's feelings of disconnection and dissatisfaction and turns them into brainwashed slaves of their organization. Yeah. The metaphor for addiction there is powerful.
So there, again, with the very surface read, there's a song called Solaris, which is based on a Russian film of the same name, about dealing with an alien ocean that kind of messes with your head. And then, of course, another space song, which is, very much about being adrift in space on a surface level.
Yeah.
So it's like, on a surface level, there's a sci-fi element to this. There's a space rock element to this, but it's a very superficial read. Yeah. That's why I was like, it's an album about drug addiction disguised as a sci-fi story. It's not really, there isn't really a narrative in this album per se, but it is on a very central theme.
So, Sergeant Politeness,
which I feel is supposed to be a sarcastic.
It's definitely got some levels to it.
Yeah, it's certain the Sergeant Politeness in general is clearly not very polite.
Well, or rather, it's politeness in the sense that politeness is sometimes used as a smokescreen for cruelty. Yeah, if you doubt that, look at some of the most well-written villains in history are manipulative villains. They don't like twirl their mustaches and go, ah, 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 ah. They will convince you that they are the hero.
Right.
And that can really fuck with your head. The chorus goes, Sergeant Politeness, searching for weak points, caress my ego, trick me so softly. a maliciousness so subtle that it makes you feel good while it's happening to you.
Right. Somebody has stolen something. Somebody is smuggling something. These 100 stones that sparkle in darkness would, to me, read as diamonds.
Or going on with the space theme, it could be stars.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. That's the other thing about this album, is that the lyrics contain a million different images that are extremely evocative, but not especially definite in terms of what they're referring to.
So it's like, I mean, we're introduced to the 100 stones that sparkle in darkness, and then later on, the same 100 stones mean nothing to me. If this is about a thief, it is someone that has stolen something specifically for the purpose of getting their high. So it's like the thing I stole doesn't matter to me because that's not what I did it for. But then again, that is a very surface reading of this.
Yeah, it also could be like, say there's someone manipulating you to do something, give up something valuable, or help them to do something. That's another thing about these manipulative villains in stories and in real life. They will resort to this tactic not because they can't get what they want any other way, but because they think it's the only way they can get what they want. For instance, I have had people offer to pay me for things, to do things for them that I would have done for free because they're my friends. And I'm like, don't insult me with this offer. Right. I will do it for free. I mean, I'll still take the money because I'm desperate for money, but like I would rather it be like a mutually giving relationship rather than a relationship based on exchange. Right. And it's the same with with this sort of like ego stroking, like manipulation. Sometimes people think that they need to trick other people into helping them. A lot of us just want to help. And so maybe it's like these 100 stones don't mean anything to me. It's like, look, you didn't have to do this to get what you want. Right. You could have just asked. Again, lots of different ways of interpreting.
So from here, we reach one of the what will be an ongoing theme in all of Failure's records following Fantastic Planet are the segues. Now, the segues have shown up in all of Failure's records going back to their first one. They recorded two prior to this, which were called Comfort and Magnified. But the segues were like part of the original track. They weren't cut off into their own tracks.
Yeah, in this one they are cut off. Yeah.
So it starts with Fantastic Planet, and then of course the band breaks up in 1997 and doesn't reform again until 2014. So about 20 years before they put together another record. And of course,
it happens.
There's 3 segues on Fantastic Planet, and the first track of The Heart is a Monster, which is their return album, is segue 4. And the segues continue through The Heart is a Monster and into their latest record, and you're going to love this title. In the future, your body will be the furthest thing from your mind. So these are really just segues out of songs into next songs, and they add something to the experience of the record. Yeah. It almost fools you into thinking there's some kind of ongoing narrative.
I think,
yeah.
I think that, like, as a relic of the pre-internet age, and again, yes, I know the internet did exist back then, but it wasn't as nearly as much of a cultural thing as it is now. People don't necessarily treat albums as albums anymore. It is way easier than it ever was, at least since the start of the recording era, to separate songs from their context. So the segues are kind of a reminder that this is meant to be taken as a unit, not necessarily as a narrative or as a cohesive like plot, but like that these songs go together. Yes, they clearly have similar themes, similar like sonic moods. I really appreciate anything that turns individual parts into a whole in any way. These songs are not intended to be listened to in isolation. They can be, and they definitely stand on their own, but that's not the whole of what they're supposed to be. Which again, this just occurred to me in this moment. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's how it works.
But that again, like if we think of the songs as metaphors for people, we are meant to be connected to one another. Mm-hmm. So that's like counteracting the like lyrics that explicitly call out like isolation and disconnection. We are part of a whole.
Mm-hmm. So with that said, I've actually been struggling really hard this past week. Mm-hmm. And part of that has to do with but the conversation we had last week about hypospadias. Listening to an album about isolation when you feel very alone in the world is not healthy. But this is one of my favorite records, and I wanted to be like, I suggested this. So I wanted to be, really boned up on it and everything. And so it's been affecting my mood, and it's affected like little things that probably wouldn't have been connected otherwise. The idea, when you feel really isolated, you tend to be hyper aware of how alone you are. I did a lot of very social things in the last few days. In these social events and then like observing people on Facebook, there are people that I've had some level of admiration for, but never really pursued in a romantic sense because they were either taken straight or it would be a really bad idea. Hyper aware of my loneliness. I'm hyper aware of the isolation of what I'm dealing with specifically. Yeah. I'm seeing these people happy in their other relationships, and I can't sleep.
That sounds really... I think I can tentatively say that I can understand that feeling because I felt something like it before.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, it's not necessarily out of a desire to be with these specific people. Yeah. Because... Again, I've ruled them out for very practical reasons. Yeah. They're taken...
There's the general concept of just not being in a relationship. Yeah. That I have felt that for. I think that even though I've had a lot of relationships in my adult life, the fact that I was late to the dating game, I didn't date until I was 21 and a half. And yes, that and a half matters to me for some stupid reason. I have this attitude that's sort of persisted in me that I'm just perpetually single, even though when I actually add up the years, more of my adult life has been in relationships than out of them. But that just means that in the times when I've been single, it's been like, oh, here we go again. Yeah. And it just feels like that defines my existence, and it's like that's not easy to go through.
So yeah, my first actual date didn't happen until I was 20. I was in that relationship for about 3 months before it went completely wrong. My other significant relationship was solely online, and that's been about it. And I am 38 years old now. I'm not trying to pile, I'm not trying to be the I'm more lonely than you thing. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to give you a context as to how the chasm affects me.
I think that it's one of those things where we can say all we want. It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. But ultimately, none of us have ever experienced both things. Yeah. So
it's a very foolish statement.
I think that I've had a lot of relationships. I mean, not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but for someone who is trans and autistic and not conventionally attractive, at least not until I really figured out what my style was, I feel like I've had a lot more success in relationships than I really expected or frankly deserve. But I still have, most of my relationships have ended really in really awful circumstances. Yeah. It feels to me like the trauma of breakups overshadows the trauma of isolation when the breakup has just happened. But the trauma of isolation seems to overshadow the trauma of breaking up or being in a really hard relationship when isolation is what you're feeling. So, I don't know. Maybe which one's better depends on your point of view.
So speaking of point of views, smoking umbrellas, you're dying in a house fire, which is the surface level interpretation.
Yeah, and that actually reminded me very literally of there's Robert Fulghum, who wrote, among other things, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
Okay.
And he wrote a lot of other books along the same lines, where his writing is basically like little short vignettes and stories from his own and others' lives that have some sort of cheesy moral to them. And some of them are more subtle and complex than others. One of his books is called It Was on Fire When I Laid Down on It, which comes from a story he had heard about a house that had been burning down. And when the firefighters went in to find any of the survivors and rescue them, they found a man that was still asleep in a bed that was on fire. And when they rescued him, they were like, how is it that you didn't wake up when your bed was on fire? And he said, it was on fire when I lay down on it. He apparently could not explain what had been going on in his mind then. But like, who knows what he was going through? Sometimes we just do things that don't make any sense. And sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we know exactly what we need to know. We can hear the panicked voices. Everything around you is just falling apart, and all you can do is just sit there. I don't know. I feel like kind of a lot of us are in that situation right now with the state the world is in.
It's that meme that's been going around Facebook for a while now. The dog.
The dog in the barn. Yeah, and this is fine.
Yeah, and so it's like I hear this song and I think of that, like, okay, so that's a song. And I think that's a very fair way of interpreting this, is everything around you is, basically up in flames, but you're just kind of like, oh well.
There's this cycle of reinforcement where some people are lapsing into apathy because all they see around them is despair. And then their apathy feeds into the despair that other people feel, because it's like, I can't do this alone. Why aren't more people acting on this? The Amazon is burning as we are recording this, by the way. Bolivia's doing something, but Bolivia's small. Hello, head. Which kind of like, the last song ends with, I don't want to leave the comfort of my bed. I never believed it would happen this way. And the first words of Pillowhead are, I sprained my will lying in bed. And I'm like, that's continuity for ya. It says, I'm so ashamed to love no one. And yeah, that's like, I actually had a friend who was saying recently that they feel embarrassed at how behind they are in relationships and dating and friendships and stuff like that. And it's like, don't feel embarrassed about that. That's like, everybody's in that situation.
I'll spend the night with my pillowhead. I don't know if you remember, there was actually a line of dolls called pillowheads, which were basically pillows that were dolls.
And there's a whole industry of like body pillows with anime girls printed on them.
Yeah, the waifus.
Yeah. You just need something in your bed that's soft and huggable.
I kind of look at it as, you're in rehab. You don't want to get out of bed. I mean, you're going through all this withdrawal and whatever else, and you're just like, I don't want to do this. Or Pillowhead could be drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, everything else on this album's about heroin, so why not this?
Yeah. Or it could just be like anything that you are like directing your vague sense of undirected affection toward. It's like, I just need to hold something. I need to touch something. So it's going to be this random object. Or activity, or celebrity, or drug, or food, or...
So our next song, Blank, is a love song to heroin. And it will not be the last one on this album.
So it's specifically about wanting drugs that don't make you feel special or good or high. It's about drugs that make you feel nothing. I don't care for nothing that gets me too high. I want some dampened spirits.
And Black and Bitter Spoons, our first overt reference to heroin. And also one of our first references to being in space as a metaphor for being on your high.
Yep, I'm living on the moon.
Now, imagine being 17 years old, there is a girl in the cheerleading squad that you kind of have a thing for, and of course this is me.
Yes.
One of the things that our school did was there would be like for Valentine's Day you would buy like $1 paper heart, and you'd write a message and give it, and then it'd get taped onto the person's locker.
$1 for a paper heart, God
or
damn.
something. Well, it was there was that, there was Christmas, there was something else, and there was something else, and I basically quoted blank for this person.
Oh, that's sensitive.
Again, you're 17, you have no idea what you're doing. And of course, this person was like not even remotely interested in me at all whatsoever.
Sometimes that makes it safer.
I like the blank way you fill up my mind. And what the hell is that supposed to mean to somebody unless you are me and you think this is an actual fucking love song?
It's like...
And that kind of... I think that might map onto... Well, let's see. Daria feels a profound sense of isolation. So she would look at something like this, and how does that work in my mind? And I don't know how.
Well, I mean, poetry works in bizarre and interesting ways sometimes. And, like, I have seen love songs in non-love songs for a long time. And especially, and I think the thing is, if you're looking for it, it's there with a lot of these things. So if you're fixating on that, and yes, teenagers, especially autistic teenagers, fixate hard.
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
Yeah. If you just like ignore the connotations of the word blank, because like blank is just considered nothingness, but like blank, the root word of blank comes from the word for white. And, like, white can also mean light. It kind of reminds me, like, when I am in severe depression, I feel that something dark and hard is expanding to fill up my entire brain. It feels like a literal brain tumor, so large that it's crowding out everything else that could possibly occupy my thoughts. And now, if that could be replaced with something blank, that would be ecstatic in comparison.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could definitely see how that could be to someone in a particular frame of mind, that could seem like a positive love song.
Yeah. Then we come to Dirty Blue Balloons, which is our... If there was any ambiguity about what this album was about, it ends here.
I got high on scrapings from my nails. Now I'm back down. My eyes are growing dark. My burnt spoon has dried beneath the bed, and I'm dreaming of dirty blue balloons.
Which is a means of transporting heroin.
I've waited so long without you. I've waited too long for you. Nothing helps, and no one else can make it feel okay. And that's like the spot you're in where when you become addicted to something, you can't just go back to where you were before because now you're addicted and nothing else will ever work.
This album is dark.
Yeah.
And it is really dark, and the last thing one should be partaking when dealing with emotional strife, but at the same time, maybe one of the better things you could be doing when dealing with emotional strife, because at least you can relate to it.
And I think most of us have had some kind of addiction in our lives, especially in these days. I hate to pull a boomer, but like the phone thing. Phones are legit psychologically addictive. Quick story. I started my internship recently. My first day on the job, I forgot. I left my phone in the car accidentally, and I was like, I won't need it during work because I'll be a 4-hour shift. I was without my phone. I was like, and while I was working, that was fine. But then I went to the bathroom, and I was sitting on the toilet. I couldn't relax enough to pee without my phone. What I had to do was I took out my wallet, and I held it in my hand the way that I would hold my phone.
Wow.
And that was just barely enough to help me relax. So I was like, God fucking damn it, I did not know I was this dependent.
Your body has a tendency to create its own routines.
Yeah.
And so our next song is Solaris. And this is the song that was based off of the movie of the same name.
Yeah.
While preparing for this episode, I sent you a link to the
Yep.
re-recorded version.
Yep.
Which
I liked it. I'm not sure whether I like it more or less than the album version, but they're both good.
Well, I feel like the one on this album is the one that works for the album.
Yeah.
And it lends itself to the paranoia that one feels when they are addicted.
Mm-hmm. Another misconception about recorded music in general. I don't think there is ever one definitive version of a song.
Mm-hmm. From what I am to understand, the band watched the movie Solaris, and then the next day they're just like, hey, we can work with this, and started writing a song incorporating the imagery of Solaris. The movie is about a guy that is going to a space station to kind of determine whether or not the space station continues its mission to study the planet Solaris, which is basically a sentient ocean.
Oh, I'm on an ocean that has a brain and makes us dream. I'm on a mission to wipe imagination clean. Woo, yeah. Okay, I definitely want to watch this movie now.
So the movie is about the slow descent into madness that being influenced by this sentient ocean is causing, and why the space station probably needs to be shut down.
What if instead this space station was manned by robots? That sounds like a solution to me.
Well, you gotta remember that this is a Russian art film, so if you go for the simple solution, then you don't have a movie, and you don't have the psychological evaluation of what it's like to descend into madness, and that is very much, and that's why this song fits on this album so well, as it is allegorical to a slow descent into madness.
And one of our least favorite things in the world is when some douchebag with a fedora comes in and tries to solve the plot of a story by doing something logical. Yeah. It's like, that's not the point.
So it's like the version on the album, which when I think of the song, I think about someone who is losing their mind. Now, given the movie Solaris is about someone losing their mind, but it's in a very different tone and sense.
Madness is a theme that is very common in art, and in some of my favorite examples of art. The Shakespeare play Macbeth has a lot of madness in it. Most famously, Lady Macbeth, who is sleepwalking and trying to wash her hands, and there's this spot that just won't go away. But also Macbeth himself, and madness that completely echoes and reflects his ascent to power. I think that those of us who have mental health issues, and that's increasingly more and more of us as our world goes crazy, when it's handled wrong in media, it's offensive and ineffective, and it's just stupid. But when it's handled well, it is incredible, and we can look at that and have a way to externalize that internal struggle and be like, hey, maybe I'm not this solipsistic entity in a brain in a jar on the moon. Maybe I am a part of a society that actually experiences this and has ways of dealing with it. And yeah, that can be really soothing sometimes. My experience with extreme mental illness has helped me to reach out to others and be like, hey, you're not alone. I know you feel very alone, but you let me tell you my story. And sometimes it helps. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it helps.
Our next song is Pitiful. This song is got quite a bit of whiplash to it. It is definitely a song about self-hatred. And that self-hatred being caused by needing the fix. And knowing that the fix isn't good for you, but you're doing it anyway.
There's a lot of bizarre imagery, like the down at the carpet shop, you want to cut me. The patterns are laughing out. I know it's not fair. Go ahead and roll me up in your detachment. I'm here to decorate your fear for a while. I'm like, that's a lot of images that don't really make logical sense, but there's a lot. There's like sometimes I find it helpful when someone told me at some point, separate out the verbs and leave the nouns.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have is cutting, laughing, roll me up, decorate, being sort of pushed and pulled and manipulated and like for someone else's.
When you have dreams, the dreams are very, very rarely linear. Yeah. They kind of bounce everywhere. Mm-hmm. If you're living in a waking nightmare, this stuff, your physical existence could start resembling dreams in how you interact with things. And even then, if that's not the case, if this is just maybe someone's nightmare situation, how they relate to what they're doing is like living in a nightmare. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the imagery isn't supposed to make sense on the surface. Kurt Cobain was somebody that didn't take that didn't really put a lot of stock in lyrics.
Yeah, although I would tend to disagree. There's some powerful lyrics in some of his songs.
Yeah, but it was the music first, then the lyrics for him, and did have very profound lines. But ultimately, the words served the song. They were there to evoke the emotion that he was trying to convey.
Yeah.
Even so, there were, for as many profound lines as there are in Nirvana songs, there's also very many nonsense lines.
Yeah, and of course, Cobain's like delivery was infamously indistinct and indecipherable. In fact, there was a whole Weird Al song dedicated to lampooning that style.
Now I'm mumbling and I'm screaming and you don't know what I'm singing.
Then there's the part where there's all the marbles in his mouth. Don't necessarily take the words too seriously.
So we're definitely dealing with somebody dealing with like self-hatred and like walking in a living nightmare.
Yeah. A kind of similar kind of feelings going on in the next song, Leo. The lyrics in Leo are pretty repetitive. It's less about verse, chorus, chorus, and more like a couple of different choruses that get repeated in turn. But the one that I found especially evocative was, he finds it so hard to explain the way he can't communicate. The feeling's there, but he can't say why it's so hard to relate to anyone. I'm like, yep, that's another of like why I'm a poet, really. I'm like, poetry is sometimes the only way that I can get those words out, is if I don't try to say things directly. I try to wrap them in metaphors and rhymes and like whatever will work to get something out that resembles the feeling, even if it's not the feeling itself.
And there's also a very hollow feeling. Leo is living a very hollow existence.
Yeah.
There is a chance that this inability to communicate one's pain is a reason why this person may have turned to drugs.
And that goes back to like the repetitiveness of it. It's like sometimes life is just you sleep, wake up, go to work, get home, eat, sleep, get up, go to work, go home, eat, sleep. Over and over again until you die. Like, and all the while your brain is in there going like, I want more, 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 but I don't know what it is. And I've been there.
It's the mundaneness of the everyday. You're dealing with it's almost like you're having the existential crisis in the middle of the mundaneness.
Yeah.
Like you realize that you're stuck in this pattern.
And there's also, again, that isolation, because he's startled by all his familiar friends. And what are his friends? Burnt out stubs, confectionery, wrappers, bottles spent and empty. It's the trash of his daily existence that is the closest thing he has to a human connection. And even that is just like a connection back to himself. Well, that's fucking depressing as hell.
This album does not get any happier. It only gets worse from here.
Although there is solace, at least in the fact that it's art. I mean, like, I think there is nothing that fights hardest against that crushing weight of mundanity than art. And the fact that this is this is music. I think sometimes the only thing we can do when we encounter that incredible despair is just to make art with it.
Which leads into the final segue of Fantastic Planet, followed by the song that this album is best known for. And it is best known because A Perfect Circle covered it for their album The 13th Step, which is also about drugs. And rehab.
And by the way, the cover of that album drives me nuts because it has a banana slug crawling on someone's face, and I'm just like, why did you do that? I don't like it.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Like, what? No, don't get it off. Every time I look at that, I'm like, I have to start smacking my face because I'm like, why?
The Perfect Circle cover is why the album started gaining more of a cult following in the internet era.
Yeah. Which, again, another thing the internet does is make it easier to find the original versions of things. It's like, it makes it easier to copy and plagiarize and steal, but it also makes it easier to find where things began.
Now, Failure had always had something of a cult following, but it was one of those like underground cult followings. You know, Failure was one of those hipster point bands. And then A Perfect Circle, it's not even the first time that Maynard James Keenan has affected Failure's career, because Failure had actually opened for Tool at one point in the early stages of their careers. So, you know, this is not even the first time that Maynard or anyone associated with Maynard has given Failure a hand up.
The Nurse Who Loved Me. Yeah, this is another song that uses the imagery of relationships. And it's kind of implied that this nurse is like a dealer or something like that, because she's got everything I need, pharmacy keys. It's like, okay, I know what's going on here. But also like sort of fooling yourself into thinking this is a genuine relationship, because it's like, she's falling hard for me. I can see it in her eyes. She acts just like a nurse with all the other guys. Okay. Tell yourself that.
And there is a very good possibility that we are not talking about a single nurse. Because later on it's she's got everything I need, some pills in a little cup, which wouldn't be a dealer, that'd be a nurse at a rehab clinic.
Yeah. Also, like, it goes into like another of the problematic gender things in media and culture in general, and that is like the professions associated with taking care of people are almost exclusively dominated by women. Yeah. Including nursing. The trope of the wounded soldier falling in love with the nurse who took care of him is like such a fucking cliche. But there's also a lot of problems with that because like it's her job to take care of you. Yeah, you feel like warm and safe and cared for, and yeah, she makes you feel good because she gives you the medicine. The medicine makes you feel better, and she plumps up your pillow, and she makes sure you have blankets so you're warm, and she brings you the food, and she brings you everything else you need, and she looks pretty, and she wears that sexy uniform, but like also she is working, she's doing a job.
In the fantasy she's wearing a sexy outfit, but in real life she's in scrubs.
Well, modern day anyway.
Okay.
In the past, not so much. But in fact, like in the past, it was like nurses were supposed to wear pretty clothes. Because it was thought that keeping the patient's morale up would help them heal. And like
morale.
that means that your job isn't just to take care of them, it's to please them. There's still some cultural holdover of that. Like, this song really relies on that trope. Not necessarily in a problematic way, because it's definitely calling out the problematic elements of it. In a lot of ways.
It's very aware of the fact that the narrator of the song is delusional.
Yeah, she's falling hard for me. I can see it in her eyes. In the context of this, like, if this were like a 50s jazz standard, that line could be read as like sincere, but in this song, in this genre, no.
on top of the fact that, the narrator is delusional, he's also there's a very one-dimensional thing about this relationship that is positive for him, or in his mind, which is the access to drugs. Yeah. So he's not even really into her so much as what he can get from her.
Considering the situation that this character is in, that's not an attractive space to be in.
No, it's not.
I'm not saying that no one can love you if you're sick, but...
There are a lot of problems with trying to hook up with people in rehab.
Yeah.
That's why it's not recommended.
Another space song. This one reminded me of a video by one of my favorite YouTubers, Philosophy Tube, Suicide and Mental Health. And he talks about the philosophy of suicide and also about his personal experiences being suicidal. And in it, he creates and portrays the character he calls the cosmonaut. The image that he came up with to describe how he feels when he's suicidal. And if you haven't yet, I recommend watching this video, and also the more recent follow-up, which is called Men, Trauma, Abuse, which is the follow-up to the cosmonaut, basically going into the reasons why he went into that frame of mind. Spoilers, it has to do with abuse. It's widely regarded as one of his best videos because it impacted a lot of people, and it also put the concept of suicide in a very different way than it's normally talked about. That suicide isn't necessarily always a sign that you are completely lost touch with reality, because sometimes life just sucks so much. There's no easy way to justify continuing it. And that can be really hard. He describes the cosmonaut as hurtling through space with no contact with Earth. It actually says in this song, I've got no Houston to wind down to. I've got no protocol. Gravity's so far away, wrapped on that shrinking ball. And it's just being completely stuck in this very distant, very isolated, very loud and dangerous place in your head. That image really resonated with a lot of people, and that's what I thought of when I heard this song and read the lyrics was, this reminds me of the cosmonaut.
Now, something I got into the habit of when listening to this record, especially when I was younger, I just kind of lay down, close my eyes, and just kind of let the album take me where it wanted to go. And that's the other reason why I noted that this is an album that disguises drug addiction as a sci-fi story, because that's the imagery that would come in these listenings, were just incoherent space drama. And another space song, the image that would come up many times listening to that is someone slowly drifting in space towards the nearest star. They're going to die. You can't escape the gravitational pull. You will be burned up soon. You are going to die. I have no way out of this. I am going to die. Now, of course, in a cinematic sense, you are falling towards the star. But of course, you're in space. You don't actually fall in space.
It would be more likely that you would orbit that star indefinitely and you would die of lack of your body's basic needs.
By the time you would get into the gravitational pull where you would be in a orbit, you would have been burned alive.
But again, it's art. It's poetry. Yeah. Don't
and so, I mean, it is from a very cinematic sense. You're drifting in space and you're reaching and you're hoping you can grab onto something, but you're falling towards a star. And of course, you can't actually fall in space, but if you put the camera in the right spot, that's what it looks like. This brings us to Stuck on You, the song that was my gateway into this band, and the one that supposedly got any radio play at all from this record as a failure song. It may be better known to some people as a song by Paramore. Also sort of adding to the oh wow, this song is cool, oh it's by this band in the internet age. The only thing I would say about the Paramore cover, and just getting this from I don't think they realized that this is a harrowing, dark song about being addicted to heroin. I feel like they're missing the point, is what I'm saying.
Either that, or they got the point, but they wanted to reimagine it
Yeah.
as a different kind of song, which is another thing we do in art sometimes. Sometimes the better a piece of art is, the more reinterpretations it will get.
Yeah. Well, I think also, too, is that this is based on my perception of Paramore as a band. I do not dislike Paramore. I don't have a problem with Paramore. I just recognize that they're a pop group.
I thought I'd drop you easily, but that was not to be. You burrowed like a summer tick.
That should be the giveaway that this is about heroin.
It's like the System of a Down song Needles. It's a parasite.
So what we're dealing with here is another love song to heroin, but it is a dark, desolate, obsessive. It's not even really love.
And it sort of like gets deeper and deeper into that, like despair. There's another repeated metaphor is like the metaphor of rhyming and verse, and like in the first verse it says, your verse got trapped inside my head. Over and over again you played yourself to death in me. And then later on, I'm too tired to fight your rhyme, stuck on you till the end of time. I can't escape your incessant whine when you beam it out all across the sky. No, I can't escape your insipid rhyme when you shoot it deep straight into my mind. So it's like a song you can't get out of your head, and you never liked it in the first place, but it just keeps playing over and over again, and it keeps broadcasting on all the radios, and it's like, oh my god, get this fucking shit out of my head. Except it's a drug.
So this is the song I heard on the commute. This is the song that stuck with me. You know, the first few times you hear it, it's like, oh wow, this is like one of those like really dedicated love songs, and then you really listen to it, and
every breath you take. Dedicated love songs, what?
Well, Every Breath You Take is about a stalker. This is about addiction.
Yeah.
So it's a very different kind of obsession.
Yeah, but again, like, dedication is one of those things where a little bit is amazing, but like a lot of it, no, dangerous.
One of the lies that we tell our young boys: persistence and dedication pay off.
The thing is, like, persistence and dedication, when you're in a relationship that's already solid and committed, is great. But persistence and dedication, when you barely know the person, and especially if they've already expressed that they're not interested in you, is bad.
I think the best example of how the media has fucked us as far as this message is Steve Urkel. Steve Urkel has this obsession with Laura Winslow. And throughout the show, it's always about him trying to get a little bit closer to Laura and a little bit closer to Laura. And as she learns to tolerate him more, one of his things is, I'm wearing you down, baby. I'm wearing you down.
That's not good.
No, it's not.
I don't like that.
Steve invents a machine that makes him cool and turns him into Stefan
Urkel, yes.
And it's through... Now, the first time we see Stefan, he turns out to be an absolute jerk, and Laura's like, fuck you, get out of my life, go be Steve again. And then, of course, you know, Steve is like, I'm Steve again, I'm wearing you down. But in later seasons, Stefan is seen as something positive. So essentially, in the end, Laura ends up with Steve because he kept persisting.
I wonder if Steve Urkel's character arc is sort of like embodiment of the incel pickup artist dichotomy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's absolutely what it is. It is the, you know, he goes from being a genuine nerd to a complete artificial douche.
And the line between them is like blurred.
Yeah.
We sometimes, like, praise nerds for their, like, awkwardness as a sign of genuineness. It's like, you couldn't charm your way out of a paper bag, so clearly you're not trying to, like, manipulate people. Now it's kind of gone around to the other side where it's like people think of nerdiness as attractive, so we have people trying to leverage that. I used to be a lot happier to call myself a nerd. And now it's like, yeah, it's still true, and I won't deny it, but, like, people are appropriating that culture in really bizarre and disturbing ways that I don't like.
The Steve Urkel narrative is one of many examples of how the media teaches us that being a stalker is a good thing. And some of us fall for that.
So, heliotropic.
In my reading of this album, this is rock bottom.
I know my faith has meaning, but I've forgotten why. It's so important to me. I can't remember why.
Seems like I'm fucked forever now. Seems like at least right now I forgot why I need to fill this space.
It's not just like a loss of like dignity or control or anything like that. It's also a loss of hope. Forgetting that there's anything else in the world possible.
Have you ever seen Requiem for a Dream?
Yes.
So you are familiar with how it
really
ends.
fucked me up. Yeah, I was like, I've seen it once and that was enough. But yeah, it's a very powerful movie about addiction of a couple of different kinds.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point that each of the characters reach where they no longer have any hope. And that's where the title is, because Requiem is music that is played during funerals. And so this was about the death of these people's dreams.
Yeah. Jared Leto's mom is basically electroshocked into oblivion. Jared Leto's character loses his arm. Marlon Wayans is in a prison work camp surrounded by racist cops that keep getting on him for being an uppity city N-word. And then, of course,
the token girl.
The girl from Labyrinth. She ends up doing live sex shows.
And each of those things on its own would be like a potentially tolerable circumstance if there was any hope of getting past it somehow.
Yeah.
People have had amputations and gone on to live like amazing lives.
Mm-hmm.
People have been imprisoned and still had good lives after that. People have done sex work and found meaningful things to do with their lives afterward. But like one thing that really hit me about that movie was that the way that the actors performed those roles, each of them had a shot where that was just looking at their face and their face was just utterly blank. And that really fucked me up because I was like, they weren't in despair. They were just in complete apathy. Okay, I'm ready to go outside and look at birds.
Yeah.
And try to think of something else for a little while.
So you can understand how this album has been affecting my mood lately.
Oh, yeah. I can see it. Maybe we should do something positive afterward.
Well, unfortunately, it's not going to be the final track. Because it may sound like a reach towards a light. Daylight may sound like you're able to get back up and you're able to find hope, but lyrically, the sound of the song betrays the lyrics.
It's called Daylight, but one of the lines is, "Daylight won't find us here." That's, again, still in the dark.
I have a catacomb with flags that flew 50 years ago. Let sleep overcome your mind. God isn't safe again. Molest the trees and chops down men. So we must revise our plan.
Ooh.
And you can't see it on the audio, but go ahead and describe what I am showing you right now.
It is apparently a handmade picture frame with the words, "We must revise our plan," in painted red and yellow.
This is the last craft that I did with my friend Kara. For whatever reason that day, the line, "We must revise our plan," from this song was playing in my head. Because the end was here. It was a matter of time. She was going to die. So, daylight won't find us here. Although as far as a song, a band, an album, this is a hell of a note to go out on.
Yeah.
Because it actually sounds very definitive and triumphant and bold. And it is definitely you are listening to the end of this record, we're going to throw everything at it. Like the grand finale. But the grand finale ends up being death and desolation.
But then I think that, like, the last line, "We must revise our plan," it contains just a kernel of hope, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because revision means that you can make changes.
Mm-hmm.
The way that this album ends doesn't have to be the way that we end, I think, is the lesson that's kind of contained in there. If there is one line that you can take out that is actually genuinely hopeful it is that one.
Right.
Because there's an urgency to it. It's we must. We must. Otherwise, there will be utter desolation. But we can change something. So I was recently trying to talk someone through some really, really terrible feelings. Mm-hmm. One of the things that was really making this person feel like there was no hope was that the Amazon is burning and no one's doing anything about it. And one of the things I did was I pointed out the window and I said, look, there are trees here and they're alive and they're not on fire. And like that didn't necessarily make them feel better, but I think like it made me feel better in the moment, and I needed to feel better in order to like try to funnel some positivity into the conversation. But like finding something, just one simple thing to look at or touch that isn't yet corrupted.
Failure, after they recorded this album, they broke up. Greg Edwards, one of the key songwriters, had a very profound drug addiction.
Gee, I'm so surprised.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
And there is a possibility, I believe Ken Andrews, the other primary songwriter, may have been dealing with his own addiction problems as well, but Greg's was particularly profound. They did not get back together again until about 2014. And that's when they started recording The Heart is a Monster, which was officially released in late 2015.
So the moral of the story is that was not the end.
Yeah.
There was hope, even if it wasn't necessarily like visible right then. Mm-hmm. I think the name of the band is really apropos though, because like we think of failure as an unambiguously bad thing. Mm-hmm. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and some of it comes down to media that I might put on the recommend list. Failure is kind of the only way to make progress. And I think that like maybe if the band hadn't broken up for 20 years, we wouldn't have this new album that has new things to say on this old subject. Maybe it would have been a couple of really shitty albums and then they would have been sick of each other, you know?
Mm. And The Heart of the Monster is a really good record too. I just haven't had...
Yeah.
I just have not had the spoons to go and do a true deep dive, just because of how much Fantastic Planet required.
Like I said before, I have a feeling it will take me years before I have fully integrated this album into my consciousness, and even then I'll still be like looking for more in it. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for bringing this music into my life. Until next time, this has been False Dichotomies. I'm Cy Castells.
I'm Daria Quinn, and thank you for spending your time with us.
Far to the left, eh? But I'm chink. Communist jokes.